Matthew Henry's Commentary on the Whole Bible. 2 Chronicles 10. This chapter is copied almost verbatim from 1 Kings 12 1-19, where it was opened at large. Solomon's defection from God was not repeated, but the defection of the 10 tribes from his family is, in this chapter, where we find 1. How foolish Rehoboam was in his treating with them, verses 1 and 5-14. 2. How wicked the people were in complaining of Solomon, verses 2-4, and forsaking Rehoboam, verses 16-19. 3. How just and righteous God was in all this, verse 15. His counsel was thereby fulfilled. With him are strength and wisdom, both the deceived and the deceiver, the fool and the knave, are his, Job 12 verse 16, that is, are made use of by him to suit his purposes. Rehoboam succeeds Solomon, 975 BC. 1 And Rehoboam went to Shechem, for to Shechem were all Israel come to make him king. 2 And it came to pass, when Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who was in Egypt, whither he had fled from the presence of Solomon the king, heard it, that Jeroboam returned out of Egypt. 3 And they sent and called him. So Jeroboam and all Israel came and spake to Rehoboam, saying, For thy father made our yoke grievous. Now therefore ease thou somewhat the grievous servitude of thy father, and his heavy yoke that he put upon us, and we will serve thee. 5 And he said unto them, Come again unto me after 3 days. And the people departed. 6 And King Rehoboam took counsel with the old men that had stood before Solomon his father while he yet lived, saying, What counsel give ye me to return answer to this people? 7 And they spake unto him, saying, If thou be kind to this people, and please them, and speak good words to them, they will be thy servants forever. 8 But he forsook the counsel which the old men gave him, and took counsel with the young men that were brought up with him, that stood before him. 9 And he said unto them, What advice give ye that we may return answer to this people, which have spoken to me, saying, Ease somewhat the yoke that thy father did put upon us? 10 And the young men that were brought up with him spake unto him, saying, Thus shalt thou answer the people that spake unto thee, saying, Thy father made our yoke heavy, but make thou it somewhat lighter for us. Thus shalt thou say unto them, My little finger shall be thicker than my father's loins. 11 For whereas my father put a heavy yoke upon you, I will put more to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. We may observe here, 1. The wisest and best cannot give everybody content. Solomon enriched and advanced his kingdom, did all, one would think, that could be done to make them happy and easy, and yet either he was indiscreet in burdening them with the imposition of taxes and services, or at least there was some color of reason to think him so. No man is perfectly wise. It is probable that it was when Solomon had declined from God in his duty, that his wisdom failed him, and God left him to himself to act in this impolitic manner. Even Solomon's treasures were exhausted by his love of women, and probably it was to maintain them, and their pride, luxury, and idolatry, that he burdened his subjects. 2. Turbulent and ungrateful spirits will find fault with the government, and complain of grievances, when they have very little reason to do so. Had they not peace in Solomon's time? They were never plundered by invaders, as formerly, never put in fear by the alarms of war, nor obliged to hazard their lives in the high places of the field. Had they not plenty meat enough, and money enough? What would they more? O fortunatos nimium, suasi bona norint, O happy, if they knew their happy state. And yet they complain that Solomon made their yoke grievous. If any complain thus of the yoke of Christ, that they might have a pretense to break his bands in sunder and cast away his cords from them, we are sure that he never gave them any cause at all for the complaint, whatever Solomon did. His yoke is easy and his burden is light. He never made us serve with an offering, nor wearied us with incense. 3. Many ruin themselves and their interests by trampling upon and provoking their inferiors. Rehoboam thought that because he was king he might assume as much authority as his father had done, might have what he would, and do what he would, and carry all before him. But though he wore his father's crown, he wanted his father's brains, and ought to have considered that, being quite a different man from what his father was, he ought to take other measures. Such a wise man as Solomon may do as we will, but such a fool as Rehoboam must do as he can. The high-mettled horse may be kicked and spurred by him that has the art of managing him, but, if an unskillful horseman do it, it is at his peril. Rehoboam paid dearly for threatening, and talking big, and thinking to carry matters with a high hand. It was Job's wisdom, as well as his virtue, that he despised not the cause of his manservant or maidservant, when they argued with him, Job 31 verse 13, but heard them patiently, considered their reasons, and gave them a soft answer. And a similar tender consideration of those in subjection, and a forwardness to make them easy, will be the comfort and praise of all in authority, in the church, in the state, and in families. 4. Moderate counsels are generally wisest and best. Gentleness will do what violence will not do. Most people love to be accosted mildly. Rehoboam's old experienced counselors directed him to this method. Verse 7: Be kind to this people, and please them, and speak good words to them, and thou art sure of them forever. Good words cost nothing but a little self-denial, and yet they purchase good things. 5. God often fulfills the counsels of his own wisdom by infatuating men, and giving them up to the counsels of their own folly. No more needs to be done to ruin men than to leave them to themselves, and their own pride and passion. Rehoboam's folly, 975 BC. 12 So Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam on the third day, as the king bade, saying, Come again to me on the third day. 13 And the king answered them roughly, and King Rehoboam forsook the counsel of the old men. 14 And answered them after the advice of the young men, saying, My father made your yoke heavy, but I will add thereto, my father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. 15 So the king hearkened not unto the people, for the cause was of God, that the Lord might perform his word, which he spake by the hand of Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. 16 And when all Israel saw that the king would not hearken unto them, the people answered the king, saying, What portion have we in David? And we have none inheritance in the son of Jesse. Every man to your tents, O Israel, and now, David, see to thine own house. So all Israel went to their tents. 17 But as for the children of Israel that dwelt in the cities of Judah, Rehoboam reigned over them. 18 Then King Rehoboam sent Hadoram that was over the tribute, and the children of Israel stoned him with stones, that he died. But King Rehoboam made speed to get him up to his chariot, to flee to Jerusalem. 19 And Israel rebelled against the house of David unto this day. We may learn here, 1. That when public affairs are in a ferment, violent proceedings do but make bad worse. Rough answers, such as Rehoboam here gave, do but stir up anger and bring oil to the flames. The pilot has need to steer steadily in a storm. Many have been driven to the mischief they did not intend by being too severely dealt with for what they did intend. 2. That, whatever the devices and designs of men are, God is, by all, doing his own work, and fulfilling the word which he has spoken, no iota or tittle of which shall fall to the ground. The cause of the king's obstinacy and thoughtlessness was of God, that he might perform the word which he spoke by Ahijah, verse 15. This does not at all excuse Rehoboam's folly, nor lessen the guilt of his haughtiness and passion, that God was pleased to serve his own ends by them. 3. That worldly wealth, honor, and dominion are very uncertain things. Solomon reigned over all Israel, and, one would think, had done enough to secure the monarchy entire to his family for many ages, and yet he is scarcely cold in his grave before 10 of the 12 tribes finally revolt from his son. All the good services he had done for Israel were now forgotten. What portion have we in David? Thus is the government of Christ cast off by many, notwithstanding all he has done to bind the children of men forever to himself. They say, We will not have this man to reign over us. But this rebellion will certainly be their ruin. 4. That God often visits the iniquities of the fathers upon the children. Solomon forsakes God, and therefore not he, but his son after him, is forsaken by the greatest part of his people. Thus God, by making the penal consequences of sin to last long and visibly to continue after the sinner's death, would give an indication of its malignity, and perhaps some intimation of the perpetuity of its punishment. He that sins against God not only wrongs his soul, but perhaps wrongs his seed more than he thinks of. 5. That, when God is fulfilling his threatenings, he will take care of that, at the same time, promises do not fall to the ground. When Solomon's iniquity is remembered, and for it his son loses 10 tribes, David's piety is not forgotten, nor the promise made to him, but for the sake of that his grandson had 2 tribes preserved to him. The failings of the saints shall not frustrate any promise made to Christ their head. They shall be chastised, but the covenant not broken. Psalm 89 verses 31 to 34.